Their digital adventures. Who will we meet today? Small biz influencer, up-and-coming trendsetter, accomplished author? You never know who'll be dropping by. And now, here's your host, Elaine Lindsay, the bionic glamourpreneur with Truel Social Media, who's the second most curious person on the planet.
Hello. It's wonderful to be back today. And I'm really looking forward to having a chat today with my incredible guests. I'm just going to give you a little look-see into what we're going to be talking about because we're going to be covering their brand new book. But here we go. Dr. Denis Cauvier's clients include hundreds of small to medium business companies, family businesses, 200 plus multinational firms, dozens of Fortune 500 companies, and several billionaires. That should give you an idea of the level of what we're going to be talking about today. With over 30 years as a professional speaker consultant, Dr. Cauvier has spoken to over 1.7 million people across America and in 56 other countries. He's a frequent expert in the New York Times, the LA Times, CBS, ABC, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, MSNBC, and Forbes. And he's already the best-selling author of 16 books. His book, Bulletproof: Mental Toughness, The Key to Winning in Life, launched in early 2020 and has already become a bestseller. His co-author is Shane Gibson, and his speaking and training clients include organizations such as the Ford Motor Company, Reliance Industries, BMO Financial, Blue Cross, Sun Life, CPA Canada, the U.S. Department of Commerce, MicroAge, and dozens of other organizations on 5 separate continents. Shane's books include Sociable, Closing Bigger, and Guerrilla Social Media Marketing, which he co-authored with J. Conrad Levinson. When Shane's not speaking, training, or selling, you can find him hiking, running, or skiing in Canada's Coast Mountain Range with his family. Together, he and Denis have over 50 years of experience working with high-performing teams, and in their new book, they tackle 4 areas to give you the furthest, fastest way to get to your digital transformation. And that book is Real Results in a Virtual Economy. Hello, guys. After me speaking, I will stop now so we can get you on the screen and hear both of you.
Great, wonderful to be here.
That's wonderful. Absolutely.
Lovely to have you both. This is, I think, an incredibly timely subject. And since this is a show about digital adventures and your journey in digital, how fitting is it that today we're talking about a book that is literally about your digital journey from A to Z? I want to ask first, okay, who started with the thought for the book?
Denis. Denis came up with the idea for the book.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
so how that came to be is when the pandemic hit, obviously people like Shane, myself, and countless other speakers and trainers, well, we were just stuck at home, and that was the reality. So instead of trying to go out and start selling stuff to clients and start trying to do like the virtual thing, like a lot of people were doing, there's just so much noise out there. What I decided to do was reach out to about 60 of my key accounts around the world, 50 plus countries, and just first of all, do almost like a physical, mental, and medical check-in with them. How are they? That was really the question. And it was just about just seeing how they're doing, how they're coping. And those who wanted to discuss business, which was all of them, funnily enough, was just start talking about what they were doing to try to, and the buzzword is pivot, right? What they were doing to pivot. And with that, I was clarity. And the idea occurred to me, that ultimately what all these people were trying to do with various results where they were trying to drive real bottom line results. So they're trying to increase sales. They were trying to capture a market share, retain and attract the best talent. So with all this as a background, I thought of the title and the concept, very broad terms. And I said, who in the world, and I know literally thousands of speakers and consultants, I've been at this 30 plus years, so who in the world would be the perfect partner? And I couldn't think of anybody better than Shane. So I reached out to him, and maybe Shane will take it from there.
Thank you, Dennis. When you do an intro like that, I have a hard time following that up. Dennis, we'd mentioned, Dennis's original mentor, one of his original mentors was my father, mentored Dennis in the speaking business decades ago. And Dennis and I became ski buddies first. That's how we first became ski buddies, and then started talking business. And Dennis mentored me on writing my first book, Closing Bigger. And so definitely when Dennis reached out to me and said, hey, let's write a book together. This is something that, we've shared the stage a few times at conferences, done a few client projects together, but this was the first opportunity to really jump in and do something like this together. So I was pretty excited about it. And I hadn't written a book in a while. I wrote 2 books, as you said, on social media marketing in the dawn of civilization for social media, right? 2009, 2010. Yeah. And I can't say I've been writing on that, but I was apprehensive to write another book on technology because things change so quickly. So Dennis's pitch to me was, we're not writing it about apps or tools. We're writing it about on the ethos of being a digital first organization. Yes. And I said, that I can get into because the principles will never change, even though the tools will change, right? And so that was what excited me about collaborating, is we're giving tools to business and sales and brand leaders on how to get their team digital first. And so that was our kind of piece that we focused on.
Yeah, and it was really important that, when I looked at my practice and Shane's practice, because there's, we offer 2 different elements, but there is some overlap. And ultimately, when we're training or speaking, there'll be anybody from brand new recruits to CEOs. But ultimately, the people that we're dealing with most are very sort of senior C-suite executives, owners, entrepreneurs, top salespeople. So what we wanted to do, although a tech person, it would certainly resonate with them. They would say, yes, this is a solid book. That was not the intended market. The intended market was for decision makers who are feeling frustrated and feeling that the world has just collapsed in time. Digital adaptation, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, depending on who you're reading. But we are where we probably were going to be with a normal evolution about a decade sooner. And organizations are scrambling. So part and parcel, what we wanted to do in the book was, first of all, to articulate in a business case terms why this is not the sexy thing. It's not the cute thing you do. It's an absolute imperative that if you're not digitally first with a mindset, you've got to be there. And we wanted to share with them the mechanics of how to develop the culture that would embrace this, then to look at all the other issues that we talk about in the book. But those were foundational points.
That's absolutely perfect. And that's really, I think, what resonated with me the most when I started reading the book. It was like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly where people need to go, because I'm gonna say I take issue with the word pivot. I think we've all had to learn to adapt. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. Pivoting is to me actually a little less than what we've had to do in order to accomplish anything in how deeply things have changed. And the fact that the book is broken out into some really good areas of all the pieces that affect us. And I think, quite frankly, leadership is now talking about, becoming so much more inclusive. We have to look at the leadership being more part and parcel of the employee level, if you will, floor, because everybody needs to be not just bought in, but everybody needs to be part of the culture of the whole. And it's more than it's ever been before. But I want to digress for one moment because I think we glossed over the fact that Shane's father was your mentor, and you met because you live up in a beautiful ski area here in Ontario. So we'll give a shout out to the Calabogie area because it's great for skiers. But Denis, if you want to take away and talk about Shane's dad, please.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks. It's so when you're open to the right opportunity, the right people, the right energy, whatever you want to look at, then it comes into your life. So this is about 31 years ago. I was extremely young, particularly back then. Now we have a lot of younger people coming in to the speaking world, which is great, okay? But back then it was very much a second career. You've made your bones as a banker, as a salesperson, whatever it was, and maybe in your 40s or 50s, you'd normally get into the speaker world. And I remember trying to grow a mustache so I would look older. I mean, I was trying, all these things and struggling. And as fate would have, Bill Gibson came into my life and was just such an incredible mentor, wonderful friend, big brother type of personality. Absolutely, without an exaggeration, one of the preeminent sales, marketing, customer service minds on the planet.
Yeah.
And for him to be just so absolutely generous, and his wife Beverly, they literally opened their home. I went and lived with them sometimes for a month or so on end, and they still never threw me out, which still amazes me to this day. But not just talking about business, about so many things, about from spirituality to creativity. In fact, one of the things is when adversity hits, and you can talk to my wife Debbie about this. When adversity hits, and I might feel myself being backed in a corner. To this day, I would say, "What would Daddy Bill do?" And that's an homage to his creative thinking. Because invariably, not only would he figure a way how to positively wiggle out of the situation, but he would enhance relationships and bring value to other people in the process. And I just had so much respect. And so the opportunity of being there afforded me to spend time with Shane and his younger brother, Ryan. And as Shane said so correctly, we developed a relationship, a friendship that transcends just business. So yeah, it was absolutely transformative in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting because, someone says, what qualifies you to be when I was younger, what qualifies you to be a sales trainer? Because I started young as well. I started actually selling speakers to conferences, booking my dad and Dennis and other speakers before I got to speak, right?
Oh, wow.
Part of it is I had a voice like this, but I was 17 and a half years old. So when you sold on the phone back in there, no one knew they were giving $6,000 to a 17-year-old for a conference speaker. And so that worked out pretty well for me. But so I kind of joke when someone says, "What qualifies you?" And I'm like, "Genetics." And they're like, "What do you mean genetics?" And I'm like, "Well, I was born into a sales family. And in fact, I'm actually a second or a third generation salesperson." Sure. So my grandmother, Mary Gibson, she actually taught my dad how to sell. So they lived in the country in Nova Scotia, in Hants County. And my grandmother used to order bulk costume jewelry out of the back of magazines. They would repackage them, and then they would go door to door in the community and sell this jewelry to their community. And my dad would go with her, and they would knock on doors. And that's how he started selling. So when I was like a kid, I was like 7 years old, and I wanted to go to Fort Rod Hill in Victoria, which was like my favorite place to go. It was like this heritage site. It was an old fortress and military base. And my brother and I go, "Dad, are we going to go to Fort Rod Hill today?" And my dad will go, "That's an awful pitch." He goes, "Get out." He goes, "I'm not taking you anywhere." And my brother and I go in the hallway and we'd rethink our sales pitch. Okay, what are the values to mom and dad? What is the outcome? What do we promise? And we'd go in and resell him on like all the benefits of taking us out for the day. And then you go, "Okay, I guess we're going today. That was a good pitch, kids." And so that was like my upbringing. And so, yeah, sales training from the age of 7. I think the first time I remember going to speaking tour with him, I was about 8 or 9, all over the province of British Columbia. He just took me out of school and took me on the road. So that's how I started in the business. And my first paid speaking gig, I decided to do on my own, and I was selling seminars. And one day I was leaving the office dressed in a suit. I think I stole it from my dad for the day. And he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to deliver a speech." And he goes, "A speech for who?" And I told him who. He goes, "How'd you get that deal?" I said, "Well, this nice woman from this nonprofit called, and she said I wanted to hire Bill Gibson." And I told her it was $6,000. And she said, "What do you have for 800?" And I said, "Me." And so that's how that was my first speaking gig when I was 18 years old. So, and it's kind of been, history ever since. That's how I started. Right. So, yeah.
Oh, see, these are the gems that you just don't get unless you get into the background when you're talking to people. I just love to hear these little additional details. And I think it's incredible that it was your mom and not your dad.
My grandmother, my dad's mom.
Your grandmother, that was the one, not a man, your grandmother, which,
Yep.
The women absolutely love the fact that she was take charge. And it was, I've been using this an awful lot lately, but my grandmother used to say needs must. And that's in all probability why your grandmother did what she did, because, nobody sat around and twiddled their thumbs back then.
No.
So let's jump ahead now, because now we kind of know where your backgrounds are and who you are and how you came there. Quite honestly, I will say that's incredible. And how did that speech go, just before we move on? That $800 speech.
I think there was nowhere to go but up. I'll say that. But actually, it went well. It did go well. I think it was definitely a tougher audience. It was a nonprofit group, and I was going in to do a talk for a group of youth who were transitioning kind of from at risk into the workforce. And so it kind of was a good group to talk to. We definitely, didn't come from the same background. And so it was a good trial by fire. I connected with a bunch. I didn't connect with some other ones, but I built a good relationship with that organization, and more came from then, and so it was a good start. I wouldn't say it wasn't like I hit the ball out of the park at a TEDx. Definitely not. And it wasn't recorded either. So that's probably a good thing. But it was a great start. It was a great start. It was a great opportunity.
And speaking about that and opportunities, do you not feel that from millennials on, they have a massive advantage over those of us who started prior to the internet, in being able to present themselves really well? Harder for you, Shane, when you were young, than, for millennials now. They can present themselves by doing, in their own bedroom with their phone. They can do a great talk that can end up going viral. It's a whole different world that we live in. Taking that to your book, okay, digital transformation. I love the word transformation, because I'm all about integration. And to me, the transformation takes into account the human elements, not just the business elements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to go through the book in kind of a linear order or the way it is. I want to talk first about something that I think is on everyone's mind, whether they're a big company, a little company. The biggest problem for those of us that in the world today that have gone through this huge pandemic, changing everything that we know, the one constant that we have is the issues with cybersecurity, the issues with scammers and spammers and what have you. And I know that's near the end of the book. I believe it's what is it? The weakest link in your digital game.
Yes.
And I just love that for the opening to that chapter. But I think it's a really important point that everybody needs to talk about and understand sort of what the onus is on them to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah, and we tapped a Julian Lee from E-Channel News, who's probably interviewed more cybersecurity experts and cybersecurity company founders than anybody on the planet. And he is ahead of the game. When I talk to him about his cybersecurity layers, it makes my head spin. Like, he's got a different laptop for almost each part of his business, and part of it is he really protects. But to a large degree, the exciting thing about cybersecurity is over 3/4 of compromised corporations, it's due to employee error. Okay, so it's actually not due to it's not some kid in their parents' basement brute force hacking your computer network. I mean, that's what the TV wants to show you, right? But it's actually your employee seeing an email from someone that says you owe us money, and it looks like an actual vendor. And before they really look carefully, they click the link and start entering details. Or someone phones in and says they work for your ISP and wants to confirm some details, and they just give it up over the phone. And so a lot of it is these sort of social hacks that are occurring. And so the great thing is a big part of, you can mitigate 75% of your risk by educating your employees and your team effectively, and in really investing in a comprehensive cybersecurity partner. So going to a managed service provider, an MSP in Canada, might be someone here like a MicroAge who would be able to, put your Microsoft 365 setup and your network into the cloud and all these types of things. But if you hand over all your cybersecurity to one company, then they can help you with the whole picture instead of this sort of patchwork. And that's where most people do, is we cheap out. Like as a solopreneur, I cheap out. I buy this software from that person. I have someone else protect my website. I've got nothing on my iPhone to protect me. And then I, you know what I mean? And so from this, I do now. But the whole point is that, so a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy, and it doesn't cost that much. Like, think about it as insurance. Small business, it might cost you $300 a month to have an awesome cybersecurity network from a professional organization. If you're hacked, the average cost to a small business is about $100,000. So anyway, that's my rant. Sorry, I opt in, but
no.
And protect
that's
your
exactly what I was looking for, because what you said there about cheaping out, it's unfortunate that we all tend to do that, thinking, oh, it won't happen to me. Oh, that won't happen to me. But the fact is, okay, you have a house, you have house insurance. Okay, most people are smart enough to understand that you need that. House insurance, life insurance, health insurance, all of those things are important, and you pay monthly. So for your business, why is it any different? It's the health of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to make that analogy of life insurance specifically. People don't buy life insurance with the hope they're going to die and, I got my money back. What a great ROI. It is really about income protection for your survivors. And you got to think about it in the exact same way. It is a form of insurance for business continuation. And it's absolutely critical. And it just literally needs to be a line item every month in your budget.
And there's really cool stuff. Like, sorry, I was just say Julian talks about, he's had some people at his conferences, the conferences, the Channel Next conferences, which bring in IT vendors and MSPs from across Canada every month. And he's had some really interesting speakers who they now have AI-based, artificial intelligence-based cybersecurity. So kind of old school cybersecurity is about building a wall, and then it tells you, hey, someone has penetrated the wall. And by then it's almost too late. And so these AI, artificial intelligence-driven cybersecurity tools actually almost preemptively cut them off. And they're using AI on the other side, right? So, this is where we're going. And it's way too much to tackle as a business owner by yourself, I believe. So you need to have, like a big company, you want your own network security people and whatnot, but you need to hire pros that support you through every layer of your online footprint. The bigger your business gets, the more employees you have, the more surface area they have to attack. And so,
absolutely,
especially if you put cybersecurity in one of your book challengers, Dennis, we might want to up our game a little bit.
I was going to say, yes.
Some of it, challenge accepted. Yeah. So, Yeah.
Well, a few months ago, we had Gina L. Osborne on the show, and she's the former FBI director in the U.S. for cybersecurity. So, yeah, it's something, it doesn't matter if you are a solopreneur, a glamourpreneur, if you're a giant corporation, that has to be not just a line item, it's got to be one of the first line items
Mm-hmm.
that you have, because all of our businesses, and as we go forward, I think you'll both agree with me that we're going to be in the virtual world for a very, very long time.
Forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving
Yeah.
forward, it's not. Yeah, it's only going to be more so.
Absolutely, and that brings me to another question. And it was great to read in the book that you think like I do. I was speaking at a business group late March or early April last year, and I said, well, I think it's important to realize that there's going to be a lot of empty commercial real estate. And a lot of the people said, what are you talking? No, what are you talking about? I said, I'm talking about the fact that it is so much more cost effective to have your people work remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have to equip them, it is still more cost effective. And I believe I read somewhere that it's somewhere in the about, what is it, 85% more comfort throughout their family, and more productivity, and less overall issues when you're not having to, for some people, I think of Toronto as a place where, my God, okay, commutes can be, 4 hours of your day.
Sure.
How
And
much different?
absolutely correct. I mean, depending on the industry, depending on the geographic location, but you could be anywhere between $8,500 to $12,000 per annum per employee in net savings just on the real estate play, because you've got remote workers.
Yeah.
And I've got clients locally here, which I don't have permission to say who they are. Otherwise, they probably would say, "Oh, you should have given us a shout out." But large digital agency here in Vancouver, 200 plus employees. They just bought a building downtown, maybe a year and a half, 2 years before this. Beautiful brick, kind of New York Soho style, and lots of glass.
Nice.
I mean, just an incredible spot. And then they sent everybody home, and the two founders look at each other and go, "Let's sell this building." And so they're literally, like, so to speak, burning the bridge as they've gone over it. They're like, "We're not going back because we're like getting rid of the building." And they'll go with something smaller, but the things that we thought were nice to have, like the social area and the foosball table and the meeting room and the lunchroom, that's actually all that's going to remain, and a few hot desks so that people can come in and work and collaborate together when they need to and bring clients in. But to a large degree, they're going to work remotely. And because their team is actually more effective, they're happier, they're working out more, they're eating better, people are saving more money. And so, I mean, we don't want everybody locked down, right? They want to go enjoy their life. They'll still travel, but it's really shown a lot of executives, even I know, from traditional industries, because I've done sales training for years, and you get these senior executives and I won't name any industries because I don't think I'm picking on them, but in specific old school industries where I'm like, your people could do their work from home. They're knowledge workers. It's like, I want to see their butt in that cubicle. I want to know that they're not wasting their whole day in the coffee room, and I want to get my hours out of them. And that was the mentality, is I need to visually micromanage my sales team. So they sent their team home, and lo and behold, their shock was their people are way more productive. And when I talk to their people, they're like, yeah, I'm way more productive. I'm uninterrupted less. I can actually get off my desk for lunch. I go for a walk in the middle of the day, and I get more done. And so there's this realization that responsible adults sent home wanted to prove that they could be productive remotely. And senior executives, like Dennis said, are going through the line items going, wow, I could save $7,000 a year per employee. Like, what? That's a lot of
paradox of the whole thing. So Shane has just done a phenomenal job articulating the value of remote working, stay at home. However, you also have a whole other massive cohort around the planet that is saying, and they're lamenting, because what they're saying is we're now forced to go digital, which means we cannot be personal anymore. So they try to do this adaptation. And in fact, the term we use in the book is reinvention. So it's like an adaptation, but it's even more personally ingrained within the individual and ultimately the culture of the organization. And we have these 5 phases going through it. But what we're saying is, no, this is the wrong thinking. To understand where the world is going and the need for things virtual, that digital is personal.
Oh, absolutely.
Digital is personal. Now, the trick is you need to know how to implement that. You have to develop the core competencies and skill sets and ideologies that's going to support that. And of course, tap into the right platforms, and the list goes on. But again, those are cornerstone mindsets that are so important, that stop lamenting the loss, rather the gain of. You can actually accelerate the evolution and entrenchment of quality relationship building via digital, because when done well, digital is personal.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that, well, I've believed for years, and prior to us coming on air, Shane and I were talking about the fact that, early on, we were definitely advocates for virtual. I've been pushing this since 2011, and the oldest person I've had on the show was 93. His name was Chester Nez, and he was the last living Navajo code talker. And it was absolutely amazing to be able to speak with him. When in life, me living in Canada, no matter where I speak, how would I be able to touch base with this gentleman who is so far outside of my orbit regularly? So virtual gives you not only the ability to be personal, but to kind of stretch and give yourself less sort of boundaries, be able to reach out to more people. Mm-hmm. And is that not being really inclusive and giving you much better opportunity to adapt and embrace where we are, instead of bemoaning all the changes? Because I know Dennis is where I am. Shane doesn't get bad weather and then have to go through traffic. I am more than thrilled, and I bet you are too, Dennis, not to have to go into a blizzard and try to get to a meeting and show up and not look, bedraggled because you had to stop and shovel out your car twice.
Yeah, and feed the mush dogs and all that stuff.
But here in Vancouver, though, sometimes it gets windy when I'm having my latte on the patio and my hair gets messed up. So, I mean, I don't always show up at a meeting looking great,
First world problems, my friend.
Yeah. I have a friend who says, Dorothy, your ruby shoes are too tight. On that note, I just want to be sure that we're sort of exploring the book, because I think as much as it's C-suite and you do a lot for the big companies, I think it's really applicable to small business, to the mom and pops, and even to the mom and pops especially, that are bricks and mortar businesses that have to reinvent themselves and find a way to embrace digital in whatever they're doing. I think the book is an incredible handbook to be able to use to take themselves forward.
Yeah, there's a couple of mindsets, and thank you for that. A couple of mindsets that we share throughout the book, and one of them is that in business today, you're a broadcaster and you're also an e-commerce business, and you need to embrace this, and you need to understand and develop the skill sets and the mindset that's going to support that. And whether you're talking about business, and Shane, that's much more his domain, so perhaps he'll speak about that in just a moment. But if you're talking about the leadership side, and you may be a small mom and pop operation, you're just looking to hire a part-time person, but you need to understand that your brand is not what you say it is. From a selling perspective, from a marketing perspective, but it's also from an employer perspective. You can, in your recruiting, you want to hire a part-time person. You can say that you're wonderful, you're the best, Well, quite frankly, it's what your, if you had a previous employee, it's what your suppliers, it's what your clients say it is. And all of these things are so significant because it's going to impact the brand. And that will also either accelerate your ability to find the right passive candidates that you are targeting so you can take them through the selection process and ultimately hire them and do everything else. Or it's going to hinder you because there's going to be a major disconnect. They won't even be looking. The ideal person, you're going to be invisible to them, or they're going to understand what they've read and seen about your brand. And if you haven't responded to it and corrected it and engaged people in some proactive conversation, they're going to say, nope, not for me, wrong fit.
Yeah, and I think from a small business perspective, I can see a lot of these best practices being demonstrated by small business owners that I know that have successfully weathered the storm and are now ready for permanent. It's reinvention and redirection, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what's happening, is a permanent reinvention, redirection. And I look at even a local indigenous owned indigenous cuisine restaurant here in Vancouver. Also, I think number 2 or number 3 on TripAdvisor for restaurants in the whole city, called Salmon and Bannock. And they're owned by Inez Cook and her business partner, and Inez Cook and her business partner. And what's interesting is that, when it first hit, they're a high-end restaurant. And their food, they never did delivery. It wasn't made for delivery, right? Because it arrives, it's not great, right? It's not the way it was done. So she really needed to reinvent. And so realizing this wasn't gonna, she wasn't gonna survive if she didn't reinvent, she literally went in and redeveloped her menu, making it still true to an indigenous Canadian cuisine, but made food that was deliverable. Yeah. And brought the price point down, and then set up pickup. But then she went beyond that as she reached out to her community. She's got a really good online footprint through Facebook and other platforms. And she began to story tell every day what it was like working in this business that was reinventing itself. She got us all on her side cheering for her. Yeah. And this got her press, this got her momentum, and literally, slammed. Like, you have to order in advance or you're not getting your food tonight. And it was like really, really cool to see that. But she applied these principles of really engaging, building a community, storytelling, right? Of tapping into platforms. So part of it is you need to be a platform thinker. You need to think of your business as a platform. So as a small business person, what platforms are you plugging into? So for her, of course, it was something like an Uber Eats, right? And other payment platforms she wasn't accessing before. But then realizing that Uber also takes a big chunk out of her back pocket, was she used grassroots communication to get the community to come to her door, right, and pick up. And so it was really cool to see that. And we've seen that in a lot of other small businesses, that they got hyper local and used networks and platforms to grow their business. And so a lot of them saw it as an initial strategy just for survival, but now I'm gone from survive to redirection. Wow. So that now when I have the walk-in, I don't doubt that when she now can seat 40 people again in her restaurant, that she's going to need to expand her capacity to be able to just handle the takeout and delivery. And it's delivered her all kinds of other businesses. So as I digress, it's definitely a book for small business people as well. But I think it's, from a large degree, because they are the CEO of their business, right? We wrote it for CEOs. And VPs of sales.
Yeah, we've got examples from huge businesses to as Shane said, a tiny business. Another example, and when we did the research with these examples, we wanted to make sure that we really did justice and told the ins and outs of their story, because their stories are very inspirational. Out in Sydney, Australia, another great example is something called Stage Kings. Now, Stage Kings is a company that they make massive stages, custom stages for really big events. Like, for example, the Mud Runner goes to Australia. Miley Cyrus, she's on tour, needs a giant custom stage, whatever the case may be. So the pandemic hits in March, and all of a sudden, they get the entire year of business gets canceled virtually overnight. So they go, what are we going to do? They've got about 8 people. They've got some talented designers, carpenters, and the like. And they said, well, we can't, the 2 owners said, we're accountable for the livelihood of these individuals. It's not just our business. And so they got creative. They said, well, there's the work from home orders that happened across Australia, like everywhere else on the planet. And they said, well, what would people need if they're working from home? Well, the thing about Sydney, Australia, it's a very expensive city to live in. And a lot of people have much smaller homes and flats. So they said, well, people could use a work table. So they came up with this ISO desk concept and designed this thing. And they had a very small social media following. So they sort of made a little blast on there, said, well, this is a design. What do you think? And, please comment. So people got back and they said, great concept, tweak it here, tweak it there. They proceeded with those tweaks. So they were very community oriented, and they produced the second generation of this thing and said, how much would you pay for it? And people came back with the prices, and they started to sell this thing online. So all of a sudden, they went from these major events to a little e-commerce platform that was socially enabled. So,
and it's flat. It's flat packed, right? Like it's
absolutely flat packed, and it's very affordable, very cool design.
Yeah.
And so they started selling these things like crazy. So they, in the midst of all this negative news about the pandemic, you had this company that had made a major reinvention of itself, starting to get some traction. Local media was desperate for a couple of good news stories. They start telling this story. Well, of course, it goes virally. They're being interviewed all over the world, and they come up with more ideas. So what happens is, with their ever-growing social platforms, their community, their tribes, if you will, become bigger and bigger. They keep asking the question, what would be advantageous to help you as you isolate? And they reposition themselves as the ISO kings, isolation kings. And since then, what they've done is they have launched over 50 successful products, wine racks to organizers to standing desks and all these things. But what they do is, as they get the idea, they do the first sort of rendering of it, and then they go to a GoFundMe campaign for each and every one of them. So they prove the success of this, and they have a guaranteed market. They have launched over 50 different products this way, highly successful, hiring more people. And now as Australia has been sort of going back to back to work, they're also asking the questions, well, okay, the back to work kings. So they're positioning it this way. So they're constantly reinventing themselves, but it's a complete digital play. And at the end of the day, what they realize is this, and this is a cornerstone message throughout our book, that being digital first is a client-centric first ideology. Because if you understand that this is where your customers are, with our iPhone or smartphones or whatever the case may be, 80+% of all research of engaging with brands and purchases is happening on smartphones right now. So, we can't afford to live in a cave anymore. We have to realize, if that's where our consumer is, we have to be customer centric and meet them where they are. So that's why we're so bullish on digital. Again, it's not about what's sexy or new or whatever. It's about customer service.
And years ago, okay, from little shops, we evolved into malls. Okay, and first they were open-faced malls everywhere, and then they became bigger and they became closed-in malls. Well, we've gone the whole other side of that whole equation, because with people not being able to go out or only curbside pickup, that's why companies like this are now, not just adapting, but completely about face and finding a way to reinvent, like Inez and her crew. And there's a small restaurant, I think it was a brewery in Wakefield, Quebec, And he switched to doing sandwiches and doing lunches, which made sense. There's a guy that we had on the show he does recycled and reclaimed art and work with just all kinds of found objects. Well, this is not someone you'd expect to find online. And God bless him, he got smart. He got online and started reaching out to people. And people have come from Nova Scotia to he's down near Sarnia in southern Ontario to get his artwork, which is absolutely incredible because that's thinking on your feet, this reinvention. And I think having the book is going to make it a little easier when you understand that it's not about doing everything digital. It's about doing what's right for you, but embracing what's out there.
And it's really understanding and having the conviction behind the decision. True hardware in America, it's a massive, like a home hardware type thing that we have up in Canada. Similar type thing, right? Just before the pandemic, about 20% of their marketing budget was for digital. The CEO has said that within the next month, they will be going 100% of the entire marketing and business development budget will be digital, which means you think traditionally, where did you find your home, your Canadian Tire flyer, your home hardware flyer, local radio ads, your TV ads, gone. All of that's gone. It's all digital now. And again, this is a major player in that space. But they understand not where the future is, where the reality is today.
Well, there's that old saying, and I know my dad didn't say it, but he was the first one to say it to me. And that was that, he knows half his marketing is working. He's just not sure what half. And that was a real, he used to sell he was one of Canada's top radio salespersons. So he sold radio for Chum all across Canada. Ran radio stations, and he would joke that we know half our ads are working for these guys. We just don't know what half, because print and radio is somewhat measurable, but you're into digital now. And, talking to Facebook executives, if you use their system properly, you can tell within $50 of ad spend, whether that one ad is working. You can turn it off and try a new one. And so the great thing about digital is once you get to really understand it, you can really measure through the whole customer life cycle. From a hello on Twitter, right to their purchase within Salesforce, to what they're doing on Shopify. You get the whole visibility if you use the tools properly. So it's an exciting time. It also tells me really quick when my marketing's not working, which is, of course, deflating sometimes. But at least you can fail faster. And I think that's the opportunity, is fail fast and keep rolling. And that's really, I think, what digital is about. It's not about polishing pixels and doing it well the first time. It's actually about MVP, minimum viable product, for your ad, for your tweet, for your blog post, whatever it might be, for your podcast. And then really looking at that feedback loop, seeing where you failed, owning it, and then redirecting. And so there's that part of it is you want to make your customers part of that, right? You want to make your community part of that. And that's what really, your network is really your brand now. And that's a living thing. And so that is something that, for traditional business people who have been around for 20, 30, 40 years in business, that's a hard one to swallow, because they're used to just pushing out a very polished brand proposition and then defending it litigiously, and now it's not like that. Your brand, as Jay Levinson said, your brand is what the customer says it is. And that's the reality of it, right?
And that's the good news in this, is that authentic beats polished. So a lot of folks, as they start on their digital journey, they think it has to be like, for example, if it was a YouTube video that was then shared through various social media platforms, you think you have to do like a major Hollywood production. Well, quite frankly, that's too expensive. And secondly, that can turn off a lot of people if that's not representative of the type of industry you're in. To authentically engage and be real is going to actually get way more traction. than something that you can't afford anyway.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say there was, it used to be marketing, and over here were your customers and customer service. And they were so far apart, they really couldn't be seen. And now it's hand in hand, because your customers, when you allow them to be invested in what you are and what you do and how you help them, it makes a world of difference. Because let's face it, okay, we all can get to know the same thing. Each one of us can Google whatever we want. So there's no more of that us and them sort of mentality.
Yeah, that's it's so important what you just said. I mean, I just want to go dial back on that. You said about helping them, and it's critical. And Shane has been talking about this for years, and you know, we cover this a lot in the book. There's a bit of a formula. We say that when you're sending out your various messages and your posts or whatever, that you really need to be disciplined, and that at least 90% of them is not me-based marketing or we're so wonderful, that it needs to be engaging and a value add to your potential or existing customer. And then that way, only about 10% max should be your actual pitch, if you will. And to have that discipline is so important. That just keep on asking yourself, how can I bring value to my targeted market?
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're preaching to the choir here. That's always been my attitude. You know, years and years ago, we had a bricks and mortar store, a children's wear store. And a client called one time and said, look, my brother lives up in Petawawa, which is about 2.5 hours away from Ottawa. And they have some really big events coming up. The kids are 10 and 12. Is there any way you could bring some of your clothes? Now, we sold really high-end children's wear. And I said, well, yeah, you're like 7 minutes away. No problem. Let's book this. I went over there and sold well over $1,000 in 1989. For something that took me an hour and a half. I was offered coffee and biscuits, and it didn't seem to me like a big deal. That customer went out and told every human being she knew, and we started getting calls. Could we come and bring to someone else's place because they have out of town people? It was not a marketing ploy. It was just a customer had a need, and I could fill that need. So let's do it. And I think that's where business needs to be now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was interesting because from a strategy perspective, and Dennis talked about what he did earlier on when we were all disrupted with this crazy thing going on in the world in 2020. And it seems to be continuing on to 2021, as we've seen, I wasn't sure what to do with my clients. And sometimes you don't necessarily have the answer to these types of things, but you can listen. And just that act of reaching out and connecting and having conversation and being a conduit for them to express themselves and generate ideas, it was actually really powerful because it laid the foundation for like my own survival over the last year, where, you know, being a keynote speaker, watching the 2 busiest months of my year, which would have been 6 figures in business, just in a couple months, turn into $3,000 a month in revenues each month. That's a lot to rebuild, right? And so, but it was rebuilt not through me getting on the phone and hustling and pitching and cold calling. It was actually about, I'm going to figure out how I can help. And just like, I tired myself out from like excessive Zooming per day, like 7 Zooms a day, 9 Zooms a day, but all kinds of business came from it. And actually reigniting relationships when I was too busy. And now it's literally, flipped, where Dennis is much the same, where like, I know what I'm doing until mid-June right now, because booked, right? And that all came from not, here's my value proposition. It's like, here's me being human. Yes. And that's that, back to what Dennis said, making digital personal, right? And that's a real important piece that I think we forget when we're trying to hustle and fill our funnel,
Funnels are for mixing drinks as far as I'm concerned.
Oh man, I may put that on a big slide with your name and face beside it in my next presentation.
Man.
Just want you to know that.
I'll take that. Absolutely. My God, I don't know where the time has gone. I have to say a huge thank you to both of you. This has been an absolutely wonderful show. It's full of tidbits that I know you can use. And as people know, at the end of the show, we always leave the audience with a tip from our guests that you can use in business or personal. A little hack, a little tweak, something that Shane and Denis may use every day. So one of you can go first.
Sure, I'll jump in. I don't know if you want to call it a hack or anything, but I just take the time every day, and it's an exercise of just listing all the things that I'm grateful for. And invariably, I can't get through the whole list because there's so many things I'm grateful for. But just coming, in the first 4, 5, 6 things come to mind, it changes your perspective. What's your focus going to be? Is it going to be on the pandemic? Is it going to be on some scarcity issues with the current vaccine or whatever? Or is it on the abundance of things and great people and circumstances you have in your life? And that's just what I've been doing quite frankly, since I met Bill Gibson so many years ago. I learned that from Bill. I've adapted to my own approach. But again, that was another example of great mentoring. And oftentimes, not every day, I specifically think of Bill and the mentoring, but many times throughout a month, I'll often think of the wonderful people that have given from their lives into my life, and consequently, I've been able to hopefully share with others. So yeah, gratitude, a sincere sense of gratitude.
Absolutely. That's great.
Awesome, Denis. And, I carry a gratitude card from Fred Shadian, who's a long-term mentor of mine, martial arts teacher. And he wrote a book called Energetic Questions. But one of the things he gave with the book was this little bookmark, a business card, but it has on the back like some gratitude questions. And I pull it out when I need a readjustment. And so I totally agree with what a great method of putting us in the right direction. So let's talk about putting ourselves in the right direction and focus. So this is more of a specific sales best practice. So we all know what we need to do in our life, but if we don't actually live by a calendar and a CRM, we probably will only do it when we feel like it. So a big part of being effective in social and digital is daily disciplines. Denis talked about that. I've talked about that. And so daily disciplines in social media, getting on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and producing content and engaging people, we need to know what are the key best practices. Probably not doom scrolling or arguing about politics. It's not that we go from social networking to social not working, right? Where we're just blowing time out energetically. So my suggestion to anybody here who wants to be an effective social seller or manage social media for the business, if you're a small business owner, is book blocks of proactive digital time. So half an hour, 45 minutes in the morning, half an hour, 45 minutes in the afternoon, and maybe on the weekend, an hour for developing or building content. And literally book it in like an appointment so that someone else can't book a sales call with you, or a partner can't pull you sideways, that when they say, when are you available? And they look on your Calendly calendar, that spot's not available because you booked it for the key KPIs, looking for inbound comments, questions, shares, LinkedIn notifications of key accounts, and also, of course, publishing that 1, 2, 3 pieces of content or sharing that you do daily to stay on the radar, because it's not about one brilliant move in social media. It's actually just about consistent presence. That tells a story. I talk about Inez and Salmon and Bannock. She didn't do one brilliant social media post ever, although she's done some pretty brilliant ones. But what I'm saying is that it's her consistent storytelling that built her brand online. And that is, you need time for that. So that would be my suggestion, is get it in your calendar and commit to those activities. and start with the right intent, which is that gratitude Denis talks about.
Well, there you have it. And I have to say, I love both of those things so much because I am #gratitude attitude all the time. So that fits in with everything that we believe. I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Denis Cauvier and Shane Gibson, the co-authors of Real Results in a Virtual Economy, How to Future-Proof Your Business. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, make the very best of your today every day. And we shall see you next time.
Brought to you by BBP TV Show and Truel Social, helping small biz navigate the digital world.